They're actually easier just to have the bar. I think Michael made some changes last night. Hey. Let's not do that. Let me, I'll just send, because I've already got everything on there. I'll just send you slides. Where everything is. Oh, and that's the next. You don't mind if I just send you that?
Yeah, you're good. You may want to turn the volume off just so you don't have a lot of steam.
What's up, man? So you're going to switch twice.
Okay.
Once for the tip, and then after that, another time to deep slide. So it's sharing screen, so everybody can see the screen. So all you're going to do is 3 fingers over there, or no, I'm going to close all these.
Okay, cool.
You're going to do here, first to here, and then do the big stuff. Second to there, big, and then you're using share.
Do you want me up here controlling slides the whole time?
No. We have the clicker over there. You won't need it.
Okay.
Come up there.
Okay. In the order of operations,
Let me complete track that. Right here in case you get a
Nope, it just came on. We're good. Thank you. How do I change it out of presenter view? Everyone online can see presenter view. Thank you. wherever you want. I think Sherry was just dropping tags. And
I'm trying to make it not.
And is this muted or is it just on?
No, it's not muted.
So we leave it on. Okay. Thank you.
Reach out to your
I promise you, he didn't say college after me, but he need to get started here. I'm gonna welcome everybody. Come to the policy board meeting today. It's good to see you. Hope you had a good drive in. I left extra early, but that didn't help none with the rain and everything. But I hope you have a safe trip back too. All right, I'm gonna call this thing to order and get straight to the business. Need a motion in your package. You got the minutes from the previous meeting. I need a motion, please. How you doing? I'm doing good, Jim. I'm doing good. Yeah, got a motion from Nashville Vice Mayor. Need a second? Got a second? Listen, I got kicked by a cow today. I may not be able to see you all the way across there, but I got a second. All in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? So moved. Okay. We'll go to our public comments at this time. If anybody from a member of the floor would like to introduce yourselves and make a comment at this time, you're welcome. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to our action items. Item 3, amendment of transportation improvement program. And I think we're going to ask Daniel to talk. Daniel, I want to welcome you to the table up here. I asked him, was he nervous? He said a little bit, and I said, look at here, you know what you're doing. I don't. So you surely go ahead, Daniel, talk about this.
Thank you, Mayor. All right. Thank you, Mayor Vogel. So, good morning, everybody. This is Amendment Cycle D for the fiscal years 2023 to 2026 Transportation Improvement Program. Since our last meeting, the statewide Transportation Improvement Program has been approved on June 21st. All already approved TIP amendments have been approved by FHWA and are live on the TIP. I've got 11 amendments for you today to present that represent about $10 million in federal funding, $20 million total being added to the TIP. So these first 8 amendments are as a result of the most recent Transportation Alternatives Program award cycle that are being added to the TIP. 7 of them are new projects. 2 are adding additional funds to existing projects in the TIP. And then we've got 1 TDOT project that we'll be making changes on, and then 1 additional project in the town of Thompson Station. So I'll walk through each of these. Give Maddie a second here. So this first one, Peter Jenkins Greenway from Spring Hill. We're adding this project to the TIP with just over $1 million in federal funds from a TAP award. This is a greenway in Spring Hill, just phases 1 and 2. Second project from Murfreesboro, Broad Street pedestrian bridge. Adding this project to the TIP with about $1.7 million in federal Transportation Alternatives Program funds. Next project, James Avenue Sidewalk Completion Project. This is a Metro Nashville project. We'll be adding this project to the TIP with about $1 million in federal funds. Again, another TAP award from TDOT's Transportation Alternatives Discretionary Grant Program. And then the next project, Cedar Creek Greenway from Mount Juliet, adding this project to the TIP with just over $1 million in federal funds from the TAP program. Then Thompson Station Greenway, Phase 4, adding this project to the TIP with $1.4 million in federal funds from the TAP program. Next project is from the City of Forest Hills, Tyne Boulevard Bikeway. Adding this project to the TIP with about $1.1 million in federal funds from the TAP program.
And then these next two projects are existing projects in the TIP. So Cedar City pedestrian improvements from Lebanon. We'll be adding funds from a recent TAP award of about $700,000 to their existing TAP funding line. The rest of that project is funded from the local STBG grant program. Next project is Eagleville Downtown Revitalization, segments 1 and 2 from Eagleville. Also adding funds, a little less than $500,000 in TAP funds. This is an existing project in the TIP. And then the next project is an existing TDOT project that the City of Mount Juliet and TDOT are choosing to phase. So phase 1 is the existing project. So we'll be revising the termini and revising the funds and total project cost. Phase 1, Maddie. So Mount Juliet will be funding that locally with about $3.5 million for those first preliminary phases. And then phase 2 will be funded with TDOT's STBG funding program for the other section from Old Hickory Boulevard to near the I-40 overpass for that project. And then lastly, the Town Center Streetscape. This is a Thompson Station project. They'll be adding that to the TIP. It might be in the other page, Maddie, if you just press the arrow. Oh, nope. Try going back. Yeah, Town Center Streetscape. There you go. In the middle there. So we'll be adding this project to the TIP, all locally funded, about $1.39 million. So happy to take any questions from anyone, and if there are questions, I'll hand it back to Mayor Vogel.
Okay, any questions for Daniel on these TIP amendments? Okay, he's going to remove them, but since he walked in, we're going to leave them on there. Everybody okay with that? All right. I'm going to go back to the public. We need some, if anybody wants to make comments on these TIP amendments, now is the time to do so. Well, seeing none, I'm going to ask a motion to approve 2023-11, approving the amendments to the 23-26 TIPs. Need a motion. Got a motion by Mayor Moore. Need a second? Got a second from somebody down there in the corner. Yeah, I think it might have been one we was going to take his away, but I got a second. All in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? So moved. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item B, adopting the 24-25 Transportation Planning Work Program, and I'm going to turn this over to Michael Skipper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all on this rainy Wednesday morning. For my part this morning, I'm going to present to you a draft of the Unified Planning Work Program, also known locally as the Transportation Planning Work Program, for your consideration. We're looking to get this adopted to make effective federal transportation planning funds for fiscal years 2024, which begins October 1st of this year through September 30th of 2025. The UPWP felt required to communicate to the public and interested parties how we intend to use federal transportation dollars across our region in support of the development of our regional transportation plan and the programming of dollars through the Transportation Improvement Program. It's also a document that we use to describe the other relevant planning activities that may be funded with state or local dollars, activities that are intended to help promote investments in the transportation infrastructure to support the federal planning factors that exist through the legislation that's been passed over the years. We presented the draft to you back in, I'm changing the wrong slides. back in your June meeting, but just to refresh the entire production timeline, we began engaging this body and the Transportation Coordinating Committee, which is comprised of the staff from the participating jurisdictions of the NPO planning area back in January, seeking local input and input from the state DOT on planning priorities for the coming couple of years. Also conducted a survey to gather information about what you were doing locally. Presented that feedback to both TCC and the Transportation Policy Board in March, presented a draft to TDOT to initiate the state and federal review process in April, brought that draft to you in June, and are looking this month for your adoption of the work program, which would become effective October 1st of this year. Just a reminder on some of the planning priorities that were identified by participating jurisdictions of the metropolitan planning area. Focus really needs to be on, as we use our federal planning dollars, addressing the rise in serious injuries and fatalities across Middle Tennessee. So safety planning is a huge component of the transportation planning work program as it's being proposed. Continue to address worsening traffic congestion. Begin to look for opportunities to meet the challenges of limited funding and financing options across the state of Tennessee and within our region, and then to begin integrating considerations for better connecting housing affordability, housing choice with the infrastructure planning work that we're doing through the NPO process. And then as far as what is scoped in the UPWP, you've got a full list of proposed planning activities, including consultant studies that are anticipated for the next couple of years in the document itself. But again, really looking to make some headway on those priorities. One particular activity that we'll get underway with here beginning in October or later is the formation of a regional safety task force to begin to figure out how to prioritize funding more directly at addressing safety hotspots across the region. We've got some planning activities related to the integration of housing into investment decisions. One of the big consultant studies that we've got scoped for the coming year, this is something that was in the current UPWP, but we went into delay because there was legislation in the Tennessee General Assembly related to impact fees, so we wanted to see how that played out before we got the study started, but we still have an effort scoped in the UPWP for look at best practices related to growth management, including ways of engaging the private sector and real estate developers in that process a little bit better to make sure that we have the infrastructure to support the growth that we're seeing across the region. And then there's activity associated with trying to find better ways of leveraging funding opportunities are being made available at the federal level through the wave of competitive grants that are out there, as well as making sure that we're clearly communicating our priorities to TDOT and the administration for the use of the Transportation Modernization Fund, the $3 billion that was made available statewide, $750 million per each of the 4 regions across the state. So you have in your packet an executive summary of the proposed activities, as well as the full document has been made available online for the past couple of months. We'd ask the board to entertain adoption of Resolution TPB 2023-12, adopting the 2-year Unified Planning Work Program, also referred to as the Transportation Planning Work Program here in Middle Tennessee.
Okay, I think Michael pretty well said it all. Is there any questions for him before you adopt this motion, make this motion to adopt this 2-year program? Seeing none, I'll take a motion. Got a motion by Mayor Moore. Got a second. Miss Lisa, thank you. If there's no question, if everybody's in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed? So moved, Michael.
With that, Mr. Chair, I also want to acknowledge that we are still pending comments from Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration, and so we may be making some additional edits, hopefully minor in nature, that won't impact the document in a substantive form. But if any of the comments do, we'll bring it back to the body for amendment before we submit it for final approval before October 1st.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, we'll move on to our information items on our statewide partnership program funding opportunity. I'm going to turn it over to Matt Mercivy. Thank you for coming, Matt. Did I say that right? Mercivy?
Nope, not at all.
Let me tell you, my last name, nobody spells it right either, or says it right.
All right, I guess for everybody in the room, the way that I try to educate people on how to pronounce my last name is State of Missouri with a V at the end, Missouri.
Okay.
I got my nickname of Mo a long time ago because it's the postal abbreviation for Missouri, MO. But anyway,
We're looking from
fun fact for me.
Okay, Matt.
That's right. No, I'm not from Missouri. Anyway,
You remind me some county commissioners I got.
All right. I appreciate the time here. I wanted to get up some of my notes to discuss the slides here, but I think everybody at this point has heard about the statewide partnership program. This is a part of the Transportation Modernization Act that was adopted not too long ago. This is in conjunction with managed lanes or the choice lanes, the rural expansion, the EV battery surcharge. What this is trying to do, and it was I believe in the packet, this was taken directly from some of the documentation that was handed to the MPO, but this is really a program that is trying to provide more support for the local jurisdictions that have really tried to push a project by including some of their local funds into this. So we would be setting aside some of the Transportation Modernization Act or TMA funds to help move these forward. So hopefully you can read that. I'm sorry that it might be a little small on that screen, but we're really looking for projects that improve the mobility, safety, preservation, and access or connectivity of the state route system. In your packet, it does say that non-state routes are eligible as long as they're included in an MPO or an RPO's transportation plan. If you cannot read the eligibility types that we've put down here, like I said, included in the transportation plan are projects that are identifying some capacity, ITS, safety, bridge projects, or major pavement projects. What we're not looking for in these applications are projects that are on an urban or rural interstate, because those are actually moving already, so there's no need to apply for that. During some of these discussions, and I don't want you to read through this yet because I think I want to kind of walk through this, but we had some confusion, or I should say maybe some clarity that needed to happen with what actually we were trying to ask you all to apply for. So we put together some of these examples to discuss potential opportunities. This isn't the full, it's not just there are only 3 projects or 3 types of examples that we have, but this is a way to try to spark the ideas that might come through for these applications. So this first one talks about projects that are completely locally funded. And I know, we saw one in here that was part of the TIP amendments where I believe Thompson Station was adding their full amount. It was a fully locally funded project. But for example, let's say that, they've used local funding to put PE and right-of-way into the TIP. The application would essentially request for the SPP funds to help assist with the construction phase. So this again is the local investment requesting TDOT to help contribute to that, and the result would be that TDOT would provide a portion, or if not all, of the funds to help with construction. This is, this will be part of the evaluation of what the amount is. I do want to mention too that the amount that's being set aside for this has not been determined. We're really going to wait to see what kind of demand we get, and it will be up to the commissioner to determine how much will be set aside for this SPP portion of the TMA. So that's one project. The other project is the local STBG funded project. For example, County B is putting PE and right-of-way with local STBG, and they've also programmed some construction into LSTBG. This is more about a swapping of projects where with input from the MPO and the membership can talk about if the SPP funds a portion of the construction phase, this would free up some of that local STBG money that could be put on an existing project or an illustrative project. And I think you all remember what an illustrative is. It's something that's in your plan but just does not have the funding to put it into the fiscally constrained part of that. So that is an opportunity for this SPP. The other option, and I think we have some of the folks in the room that have an allocation of local STBG that does not quite fund all the phase of a particular project. So that third ask would be requesting SPP funds to help fund the remaining portion of a particular phase to help keep that moving. So that is a way, I think, hopefully it starts to get your mind into what type of projects you think would be worth putting towards this application. We do have a project intake system that has been established, and I know in your packet there was a link that was put on GNRC's site to help you get to that application. It's a pretty straightforward application. We're not asking for a lot of complexities in it, but you'll see it's kind of categorized into these three main portions of what we're looking for. I do want to mention that cities and counties are the sponsor. You can have third-party help putting together the application, but we do request that the application is submitted on behalf of the city or county that is being helped. The intake system, once we receive all of those, and that again closes on August 4th, we will compile that list. We will put together a evaluation criteria, which is based on loosely based on the categories on the right of what we're looking at, and then make that notification sometime, hopefully in this fall, so we can have that align with next year's 3-year plan. And that is it. So I am happy to answer any questions if you might have those. I've been told that we've already had some members of this board submit a project up to this point. I don't know how many, but that makes us feel a little bit happy that the application process was not complicated, so people were able to submit. But again, I'm here for any questions you might have on eligibilities or schedule or anything like that.
Okay, anybody got a question for Matt? Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Mayor Moore.
Good morning.
So, as a city, if we have a project that we're going to get involved on, what if we're willing to pay for engineering?
Yes, that is exactly what we're looking for. We would like to see, I think what the idea here is, if a jurisdiction has the ability to bring money to the table and try to help push these phases along, this is what we are looking for in these applications.
Mr. Chair, I got a question for Matt. So Matt, as you all know, there's projects across the region, across the state even, that are experiencing cost overruns, which is preventing them from getting out to bid or to be let. Do you see any possibility that we can use some of this funding before the legislature convenes to top off those projects to prevent further delays?
I believe those are eligible. I think there are opportunities to, request for the cost overruns. Again, they're going to be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, but the question is more about the timing of that. So is there any chance we'll be able to sort of liquidate some of those monies sooner than that December, January time frame?
No, because part of all of the application process is in conjunction with everything that's going on with the TMA that needs to be reported to the legislature in December. So by December, TDOT has to have the plan in place for how the $3 billion will be accounted for. So it is highly unlikely that this will be accelerated beyond that. Again, because we don't know how much is going to be put forth on that yet.
Okay, anybody else? A question for Matt? Now, that's the website right there, just Build With Us?
That is the overall website that has all of the initiatives that we've been
All
doing.
initiatives, okay.
Yeah, it's under the Build With Us umbrella, but the TMA is part of that.
All right, because I like to share this with some of my cities. I don't want Gerald to get it all. He's the only one sitting there. All right, Gerald? Yeah. Hey, thank you. Nobody's got a question for Matt? Okay, Matt, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item B, the carbon reduction program funds, and looks like Daniel's up again.
Thank you, Chair. Can I have the clicker, Nickel? All right, so I'll be presenting on the carbon reduction fund, program funds. You may remember this program. The new program from the Infrastructure and Jobs Act passed in 2021 sets aside $6.4 billion nationwide, $139 million a portion for Tennessee. Tennessee is currently going through their carbon reduction strategy, which they're required to do by FHWA to figure out an approach to spending those funds. And then for our two urbanized areas, about $13.8 million is suballocated to our Nashville-Davidson urbanized area, and then $1.9 million is suballocated to the Murfreesboro urbanized area. Those numbers are 4-year allocation over the course of the current TIP. So this program, you may recognize it. It's very similar to the CMAQ, Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program. Eligible projects, ITS, electrification upgrades, vehicle-to-vehicle infrastructure, public transit, bike ped facilities, street lighting, and traffic signal upgrades. Generally requires a 20% non-federal match, although there are some exceptions to that, Van Pool, some ITS projects being examples of that. And then it has an obligation deadline within 4 years of the apportionment. So in terms of a recommended approach, as Michael mentioned, we have lots of projects currently in our TIP that are experiencing cost overruns on those further phases, so right-of-way and construction. So in terms of funding prioritization, our approach, proposed approach is to make available all of this funding for use on existing TIP projects where CMAQ or Transportation Alternatives Program or the Multimodal Access Grant funds are insufficient to cover costs in order to move towards implementation. In terms of a timeline for programming, month 1, depending on the timeline this board wants to do, policy board issues call for projects, and then local jurisdictions and local agencies can submit applications to GNRC. A month after that, GNRC staff will conduct product evaluations. And then month 3, policy board will consider award recommendations and associated amendments. So again, this is a new program that we are looking to help fund cost overruns for existing TIP projects that may not be able to move forward due to insufficient funds. So I'm happy to take any questions, any additions.
Any questions for Daniel? Michael, would you like to add something?
Mr. Chair, we didn't, just wanted to mention we didn't bring this as an action item this morning because this is likely the first time some of you have really wrapped your head around the opportunity that is being provided to us through the carbon reduction program. But we did want to let you know that in the conversations that we've had with board members up to this point, that staff is willing. The reason why we put month 1, month 2, month 3 versus September, October, November is because if the board was interested in us moving forward on this, if this is a no-brainer strategy to get this money out the door as quickly as possible to projects experiencing cost overruns that is creating delays in the delivery process, particularly focused on those CMAQ projects that are seeing shortfalls as a result of some of the shifting CMAQ grants that were previously made by TDOT. Just want to let you know staff is willing to accelerate this process if we were to be directed to do so today.
Thank you, Michael. It sounds like somebody could move some projects, get it going again. Any questions for Michael or Daniel? Mayor Brown.
So I looked at the definition for vehicle-to-vehicle infrastructure.
What is it? Can you explain it to us?
Communication between vehicles and the highway system. And
Okay.
so I can think of one application, but I'm not really sure what that encompasses. So if you have the exposure to expand on that, I'd appreciate it, just from my own knowledge.
The only project I can think of that's currently in our TIP is the Smart Corridor project. I believe Yeah, I believe that would be the only one I can think of that has vehicle-to-vehicle infrastructure, but Michael may be able to expand on that a little bit more.
No, I haven't even heard of any others being potential candidates. I think, we've got a lot of CMAQ projects, though, that are eligible for this grant program that are kind of just sitting around waiting on money to get to construction, which is going to sort of that cumulative effect of the longer you wait for money, the higher the price tag goes up, the longer you got to wait for enough money to do the project. So like I said, if the board was interested in directing us to go ahead and implement the call for projects this month, we'd be happy to do that. Otherwise, I know this is the first time we've really had a group conversation about it. We're happy to come back to you in September and request that action from you, but that would put us in about November timeframe for making the awards and the associated TIP amendments, and then a little bit of process after that to go through the state and federal approval process on those amendments.
Yes, ma'am.
Was this shared with the TCC? It was, and did they offer any suggestions about how the best way to process this? Because I would think that this is something that we should be having the conversation internally as staff and then going to our elected officials to share.
Which is why we didn't bring this as a requested action item. You have until September to formulate an approach. Again, the sort of obvious approach from GNRC staff is to move forward on projects that are already eligible, that are waiting on funds, versus trying to fund new projects through this program.
Matt, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I do. I do want to stress from the previous slide about this fairly quick turnaround with obligating these funds, because they're within 4 years of allocation. So please keep in mind what type of projects would you think about pushing forward to make sure that you do not lapse any of these funds.
Good point. Good point. Has anybody got any questions? Mayor Anderson.
Yeah, this is related to status report. On the status report that you have, on the last percentage in the first block, it says there's 19% TIP effective period lapse, 9/48. So is that telling me that I could take 20% of the $1.7 billion, and that's unfunded money that we're going to reallocate to some other project?
Well, what that 19% is a measure of how much time of the full 4 years has elapsed. So we're 20% through the time frame of the TIP, and we've obligated 15% of the money. So it's just a benchmark for the obligation rate. Now, we have strategies in place that say if a project isn't being obligated, and the reasons why that project aren't being obligated are in noncompliance with the programming policies, and we try to shake that money loose and reprogram it on other projects that are ready to go. We typically do that about annually when we ask for folks to be honest about the status of their projects so we can free that money up to put it on cost overruns that we're experiencing right of way or construction. But specifically that 19% just means we're 19% of the way through the duration of the TIP, and we've obligated the 15% of the federal highway grants.
So let me ask it a different way. What percentage, what total amount of money do we have not obligated that could be that's sitting out there for future projects?
Well, and if you, I'm happy to answer that now, but I plan to cover this in its entirety under the staff report at the end of the agenda.
That's fine.
And then some of these tables will give you some information about what grant programs have the lower obligation rates, which has been the focus of the Project Delivery Task Force, to figure out how to get that money moving on those projects or redirected to other projects.
And as a follow-up, then I'll wait for your comments, but in the past, we have been criticized by not spending the money that we have unfunded dollars as compared to other MPOs across the state. And I know you got a good answer for that, but by the same token, there's a lot of money sitting there that's unobligated over a period of time. And I really think because the board needs to know that, because we're all begging for projects. And now TDOT's got this obligation time frame of the end of the year. Hopefully we could use some of that for some matching money out of our areas if it was possible.
Well,
yes or no? Maybe. So can I follow back up, then you can go into your spiel. But, you know, I appreciate cities like Franklin that have the opportunity to throw in money to help move the program forward. And Matt said that's exactly what we're looking for. But when you're looking at an interstate project that may run through 4 or 5 cities, that makes its way all the way down to Alabama, the locals have enough need for these dollars without having to figure out a way to put matching money in that's purely 100% federal and state dollars. And that's what our federal tax dollars go for, and our state gasoline taxes and all the other things, and the obligation that the House and the Senate put together this year. It's hard to like Franklin did back at you. What'd you all put in, $9 or $10 million on that section?
7.5.
Yeah, $7.5 million. That's a lot of money for a city. And I have a funny feeling Nashville has the same issues of trying to find those dollars to match to get that up on the program. But when it comes to interstate programs, when you've got unfunded programs, Michael, the message needs to be we need to figure out a way to spend that money to get people moving from Alabama to Kentucky on 65 or 24 or whatever interstate you want to pick. And that's just my 2 cents. That's like asking me to fund something in Davidson County. I'd like to help them, but I'm not going to be able to do that.
Well, and I appreciate the sentiment here in terms of the need to make sure we're not sitting on money that has been appropriated for transportation improvements, right? I think on the issue of the obligation rates of this MPO, I wouldn't characterize it as being worse than other MPOs in the state. The larger MPOs in the state of Tennessee have a hard time getting their money obligated. But what that means is it doesn't mean the money is not on a project. It's on your projects. The money is on your projects. Y'all are having a hard time getting through the process for one reason or another. In some cases, it might be because you haven't obtained the local match from the local legislative body through the budgeting process. It could be that you're stuck in environmental review. It could be that you are having cost overruns and right-of-way acquisition that wasn't anticipated, and that's preventing you getting to the construction dollars, which are sitting there unobligated. So that's the focus of the Project Delivery Task Force is, how can we better anticipate the true nature of timelines and cost estimates so that we don't overcommit our money onto projects that aren't yet ready to move forward. And so that's the effort that Mayor Reed is leading right now to figure that out. Now, obligation rates on state-managed projects is fairly good. In the state, and Mr. Deggs is here, he attests to this all the time. The state does a good job of making sure it obligates all of its obligation authority on an annual basis. The division or the where we diverge when it comes to obligation rates is usually on those locally managed projects that still have to go through the TDOT local programs process. So we're talking about limited staffing of the department to process all of their projects, to help you through the process as well. We just need to be faster. And sometimes this better solution may be to focus on fewer projects that have a higher probability of moving forward. But the obligation rates are reflective of the fact that the projects that we've identified have already awarded money to in the TIP. Those are what are not moving forward. But I think we'll make this a little bit more clear as we go through the staff report, which will be a recurring item on these meeting agendas so you can track our progress, ask the questions that you have, which I think are going to be the key to the follow-up action that we need to take to get money directed in a way that can be used as quickly as possible.
Good, Mayor. Okay, well, thank you. It's a good question, Sil. If there's no more questions, we'll move on. Anybody got a question on that? Yes, sir, go ahead. Okay.
As far as the carbon reduction funds, we know what we want to obligate our funds to, and we really don't want to wait until November. Is there any way we can accelerate that process? I know that we're still trying to finalize the Carissa dollars that are outstanding, but is there any way that we can accelerate at least our projects to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of options, one of which I've already offered to you all and TDOT, which is that for the suballocated CRP dollars, the dollars are suballocated to the Murfreesboro urbanized area. That geography includes the city of Murfreesboro. It's not your city limits, obviously, and parts of the unincorporated Rutherford County. There is an opportunity to convene a conversation amongst those stakeholders, get some consensus for using those funds for the project that you have a cost overrun on, and then bring that back to this body. This body will still have to approve the award, process the TIP amendment. The other option is that, it's coupled with our programming decisions for the Nashville-Davidson UVA. We're fine either way. What is important to us is that the stakeholders within the Murfreesboro urbanized area have consensus on the use of those funds, and we're happy to facilitate a recommended award and a proposed amendment to the TIP on a timeline that y'all and this board feel comfortable with. We're also comfortable with going ahead and starting the call for projects for both pots of money. Given the considerable amount of need on existing projects that are eligible for this funding source, we don't have a lot of time to start new projects and get that money obligated on the timeframes, to Matt's point. That said, we purposely didn't bring this as an action item because we're not wanting anybody to feel uncomfortable with the opportunity that's being presented here.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Good. All right, any more questions, please? Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
Move this forward? Sorry, thank you. Thought my voice was loud enough.
Yeah, so your next regular meeting is September, so if the board wants to do a special called meeting, say in August, to save a month on the timeline, we'd be happy to facilitate that. It will require a quorum, and we're happy to pull that together. We could co-locate it with the regional council meeting, which is scheduled for the third Wednesday in August, so we could take care of it then. That'd save a month on the timeline. I don't know if, Jim, the bigger issue with your project is that even if you program all these funds and your STBG funds, we're still waiting on about 1.8, a share of that 1.8 million dollars that we're hoping TDOT contributes, since they were the beneficiary of the CRISA funds that were allocated to your urbanized area, and that got placed on a state project. You didn't get those obligated before the deadline? I thought we had 100% obligation.
Well, I'm sorry. Are you saying GNRC had 100% obligation?
For the two urbanized areas.
Okay.
Right, and that money got obligated on TDOT projects to prevent its loss.
Most of those were flexed to FTA. Those are
not the Murfreesboro money, I don't believe.
Well,
but if we can go back, we're in the weeds now, but we can go back to those emails. We're trying to get a meeting with TDOT to make a decision about the state's contribution, because we've got a plan to move that project forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, regarding the CRISA shortfalls that are happening right now, I mentioned to you, Jim, before the meeting that we're trying to do what we can to make everything whole, so we don't have these problems. This is something that was beyond our control when these got removed and taken away for everybody. So we really didn't have a lot, and you probably knew by the urgency of our reaching out to all the MPOs, trying to find out how we can get these in somewhere where they're not going to disappear. But we were, 80% successful. I can't remember the exact number, but it was within 2 days that all this happened. But anyway, I would love to, work with you all to see what we can do to make this, take care of this shortfall.
So, Mr. Chair, there's no motion to move this forward this month, but there is consideration given to an August special called meeting to try to save a month on the timeline. We'll go ahead and plan to convene the Transportation Policy Board in August, either immediately before or immediately after the Regional Council body meeting, probably immediately after. You got it?
Okay, Michael, that don't take action by this board, does it? Okay, great. Okay, it'd just be like somebody calls an emergency meeting in the county or whatever. Okay, yeah, good deal. Anybody else got any questions? Seeing none, well, hey, thank y'all. You know, we're gonna move down our federal aid urban boundary and introduce Max Baker to present that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. Today I'll be providing an overview of the federal aid urban boundary and the timeline for updating it. Federal aid urban boundary is updated every 10 years in conjunction with the update of the urbanized areas and redesignation of that. They represent essentially the areas that will be defined as urban and rural for functional classification of roadways. So that goes into helping define design guidelines, interstate spacing of interchanges, and such. In 2010, our area included 2 large urbanized areas and 8 small urban clusters. The resulting 2020 census had a few changes there, so it actually went to 3 urban areas, or large urban areas, and 5 of the small urban areas. Columbia and Mount Pleasant merged together. Fairview was actually eliminated from being an urban area, and Spring Hill transitioned from a small urban area to a large urban area. And White House split off from the Nashville-Davidson large urban area to become a new small urban area. I believe I went over this earlier, but essentially this designation helps define eligibility of roadways for federal funding and design guidelines. We've been working over the last few months with your staff to identify where the smoothing would occur or where the urbanized area boundary adjustments would happen. And I believe to date we've worked with 2 jurisdictions so far to make these changes, and are welcome to any more changes if needed. Like I said, the functional classification, this is really where the rubber meets the road. So roadways are classified from interstate down to local roadways, and how they intersect with this urban area helps define eligibility and also design guidelines. And as far as timeline goes, we've been working on this over the last few months. Please have your staff or yourself submit any comments or changes, and we will hope to incorporate those for an August review and submittal to TDOT, and they will then work with Federal Highway to hopefully get approved by December. And don't forget the link down there at the bottom, gnrc.org maps/federal aid, where you can review in detail city limits, urbanized areas, and federal aid urban boundary. Get familiar. They're all very similar terms that often get misused or jumbled up. So it is a very helpful application to help straighten that out. With that, I'll take any questions.
Anybody got a question for Max? Okay, thank you, Max. All right, we're going to move to our regular reports, our FHWA report. I'm going to recognize Melanie Murphy.
Thanks, everyone. First, I'll just mention I'm Melanie Murphy. I'm not Pam, who usually attends these meetings. I'll just let everyone know that Pam's on a 60-day detail with the Office of Operations at FHWA, so she'll be kind of out of pocket until mid-September, so her detail started Monday. So if there's anything you need to coordinate with her on, usually reach out to me or Sean, that most of y'all know, on anything. So she'll be on another assignment for 60 days, but we'll be back in September. So you all will see her maybe the next meeting. We're talking all about funding and funding shortfalls, and like always, there's lots of funding opportunities available from the federal government. Two got put out very recently that I'll just quickly mention. The Multimodal Project Discretionary Grant Program was just released. This is a joint funding opportunity that covers 3 programs. Covers the INFRA program, the MEGA program, which is the National Infrastructure Project Assistance Program, and then the Rural Surface Transportation Grant Program, also known as Rural. So it's one opportunity. I think it's about $5.5 billion for 3 projects that are made available. So they're trying to streamline the process a little bit on that, and those applications are due August 21st. I know GNRC provides the DOT Navigator link in the packet, so be sure to check that out. And then another joint funding opportunity was recently released for the Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhood programs. So that releases about $3 billion for 2 programs. It's another joint opportunity. Reconnecting Communities Pilot Program and the Neighborhood Access and Equity Program. So this will fund capital construction projects, community planning, and regional partnership challenge kind of projects. So those are relatively new programs. And then the deadline for that September 28th, 2023. And then I think we already mentioned that the FY 23 to 26 STIP was approved June 21st. So really appreciate the MPO and TDOT working through any issues and making sure that's approved. And then UPWP, you mentioned that it's under federal review. I think the deadline is today, so you all will get comments from us today on that. But like you mentioned, Michael, I don't foresee us having any comments that would have to have the UPWP go back out for review, for public review. So I think that should be on track to get approved on time. And that's it on my end. Thanks.
Here you go, Mark. Hold
on. Mayor Moore, we'll have the navigator is linked in the packet, but also gnrc.org/grants will be your gateway to any of the announcements that Melanie made this morning. So that's the URL to remember.
Every federal grant is on grants.gov.
And grants.gov, and as well as all the individual state grant listings from various departments of state government are also linked from the gnrc.org/grants. And it's interactive, can be easily overwhelmed by all the money that's available out of the federal government, right, Ray?
Thank you. Anybody else got a comment or a question? Tell John Rhodes we said hey. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Okay, if nothing else, we'll move to the TDOT report, and I'll recognize Matt again. Good deal, Matt. You're a good man. All right, I'm going to turn it over to the staff report and give it back to Michael again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to conclude with a quick overview of the new TIP status report that we'll start providing at these monthly meetings. But before I get to that, which is the reason why you will all stick around until the end of our report, I do want to go over the upcoming meetings that we've got planned for everybody. There'll be a little bit of a deviation on this as August 16th, in addition to the regional council body, which is planning to convene to get a report on solid waste strike force activities. I think the big feature item here for August 16th is going to be information from TDEC on the Brownfields Grant Program. It's going to be very much of interest to many of you around the table. We will also convene the Transportation Policy Board that day immediately following the Regional Council to take up a potential action item related to issuing a call for projects for the carbon reduction program that we talked about a little bit earlier in the meeting. So stay tuned for more information about that. And then on September 20th, that's the next regular meeting of the TPB, this body here. We'll have our standard look at proposed TIP amendments, the TIP status report that we'll talk about here in a little bit. And then we also plan to bring to you all recommendations from the Project Delivery Task Force that Mayor Reed has been leading up over the last year, a little bit over a year. And then in October is convening of our regional council body. We'll have an update on the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, which is the gateway to funding from the Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration, and ongoing information about available grant opportunities across the spectrum from transportation, economic development to housing and so on and so forth. In addition, we are about to announce the date of our annual partnership luncheon to be September 20th, immediately following the Transportation Board meeting. We will be in a different location that day. We're finalizing those details now in terms of the location for this board meeting as well as the partnership luncheon. We are very happy to be announcing that we will have Governors Bredesen and Haslam in a conversation with our region about civility and working together and cooperation and how all that is good for governance. And so there'll be the special feature for our partnership luncheon this year. But that'll be September 20th, immediately following the Transportation Policy Board. And as always, all of our meetings are available online at gnrc.org/calendar, including meeting times, locations, and agenda packet. So with that, I'll now return to the handout that was provided to you at your place at the beginning of the meeting, which is a look at the new TIP status report. This is derivative from the information that we presented at the June meeting. We took the feedback that we got from that meeting and focused it on the things that we thought were the most important to you in terms of tracking the performance of the Transportation Improvement Program. This report will grow over time to include more information, but we didn't want to overwhelm you with 10, 15 pages that really became a distraction for the things that we wanted to focus on. So figure one, I'm not going to walk you through all of this, but figure one is sort of just the overall health check of the Transportation Improvement Program. Here you can see the start and end dates for the 4-year program, the effective period for the information in this report. All the numbers in this report are from figures related to the October 1st adoption by this body through June 30th. So all the obligation and programming data is through June 30th. You see the number of projects that we have in the TIP. That's 214. We've got $1.7 billion of funding. That's federal highway grants, FTA grants, TDOT money, and your local match. Even some locally funded projects make up that $1.7 million. This report today is primarily focused on federal highway grants. We'll work with our transit agencies to incorporate FTA grants in the future. But when it comes to obligation rates, the challenge tends to be on the federal highway grants, not the FTA grants. You can give Billy all the money you want. She's probably going to figure out how to get it obligated for WEGO, both RTA and the Nashville NTA. So of the $1.7 billion that's currently programmed in the TIP through 2026, about $1 million of that is from Federal Highway Administration grants. Of that, 152, just a little over 152 million has been obligated since October 1st through June 30th. That's about 15% of the available federal highway grants that have been programmed. And as we discussed earlier, we're about 19% of the way through the duration of the TIP timeframe, just as a comparison for how well we're doing in terms of staying on track to obligate our money. That's a pretty good obligation rate. We'd love that to be 19% or higher. So the issues really become when you dig into the numbers a little bit more, you figure out what grants are being obligated and what grants are not being obligated. So I'll skip over figure 2. It's just to look at the 214 projects in the TIP and what their active phase of work is. I think what's notable here is that 58 of those projects haven't yet started, and 49 or 23% of those projects are either under construction or being implemented. So let's focus on the conversation we were having earlier, which is related to obligation rates. And so we're going to present this information to you on an ongoing basis in two separate figures. There is money from Federal Highway Administration that is made available to TDOT that can be used anywhere in the state of Tennessee. subject to certain geographic limits on the federal functional classification system, of course, as Max just mentioned. But any community or any roadway that's otherwise eligible could be in the mix for the statewide pots of money. There are 5 of these: the CMAQ program, the HSIP program, the NHPP, the STBG, and the TAP. Those are all defined there. But you can see the amount of money for those grant programs that are programmed in fiscal year 2023. Federal fiscal year, so this is October through September of this coming year, is $250 million of TDOT's statewide federal highway money is programmed on projects within our region. Of that amount, $141 million, or 56% of that, has been obligated. Obligation means that the federal government recognizes this as a legal commitment to pay for eligible expenditures on that project, and it's safe from rescission or redirection unless it is otherwise deobligated and reprogrammed by the MPO. And of the $141 million that has been obligated since October, $8.2 million of that was obligated within the 30 days of June. Okay. So that's what that's saying. I'll stop there. We have similar information presented for the sub-allocated funding, which is a little bit more complex to talk through. But any questions about that information or what you're seeing? So really good obligation rate of the statewide pots of money, 56%. And I trust that TDOT will get very close to 100% obligation on these pots of money by September 30th, right? All right, figure 4, though, is where it gets a little bit muddier. So a portion of the Federal Highway Administration grants are required by law to be sub-allocated to urban areas across Tennessee. Max talked about the fact that there are different types of urban areas, and depending on what type of urban area you are, that may dictate the amount of money. Also, it may also dictate TDOT's discretion into how much that urban area gets. So for the large urbanized areas, these are urban areas of 50,000 or more, that TDOT is required, well, I should say the 200,000 or more in population urbanized areas, TDOT has really no discretion on the amount of money. The amount of money that comes to the Nashville, Davis, and UVA is published in the Federal Register, and that's the amount that TDOT is mandated to sub-allocate. So for the Nashville, Davis, and urbanized area, there's a map of that area in Figure 7, because it's not Nashville, Davidson County, it's parts of 5 counties that are the geography, that's the basis for that money. For the Nashville, Davidson urbanized area, we have mandatory sub-allocation of STBG funds, HIP funds, TAP funds, and the CRISA funds. And you see the amount programmed on NPO area projects in fiscal year 23 next to the amount of obligations in those programs and the obligation rate and the amount obligated within the last month. The Murfreesboro urbanized area also receives a mandatory sub-allocation, but they're part of a group of urban areas that TDOT has some discretion on how much goes to the Murfreesboro urbanized area. TDOT is required to allocate a certain amount of money to all the urbanized areas of Murfreesboro's UVA size, but can determine its distribution to those areas otherwise. $3.2 million is currently programmed in the TIP for the Murfreesboro STBG program. You can see what has been obligated there. And then the local STBG, the LSTBG, some of you are in urban areas less than 50,000. You also are part of a group of urban areas that TDOT is required to sub-allocate to, but they also have discretion on how much of that money goes to each individual small urban. We just group all the small urbans together into the LSTBG record here in the table to show you that $9.5 million is sub-allocated to those small urban areas, and 7% of that has been obligated through June 30th. I'm happy to talk about any of these programs if you're interested. What's really important, though, is that as far as federal obligations with sub-allocated funding outside of the CRISA, which was that coronavirus supplemental appropriation that we talked about earlier in the meeting, we are experiencing extremely low obligation rates on the other traditional formulaic grant programs. And that is of real concern because if it weren't for TDOT's state of the practice to spend old money first, these funds would be subject to lapse. And so obligation rates for urban STBG funds for Murfreesboro, Nashville are really low at this point in the year, and really a great concern to the board, staff, partners, and the project delivery task force. To date, 16% of the suballocated funding has been obligated from the suballocated programs. Any questions or reactions to any of this information? Great. And then on the second to last page, figure 5, is a closer look at the federal obligations from Federal Highway on locally managed projects. We mentioned earlier that the state TDOT can manage the project, get it implemented, shepherd it through the process, or you can get a notice to proceed from TDOT to enter into management on the various phases of project work yourself, typically relying on either in-house or outside expertise to do that. But these are the projects that are being managed by local governments, which have had federal highway money obligated since October 1st through June 30th. The date of obligation, the phase of work that was obligated, the amount of money associated with the grant that was obligated. So $17.8 million obligated on locally managed project through June 30th. Don't fall for the trap, which is to assume that these are all sub-allocated dollars. So some of these grant programs are actually pots of money that are made available statewide. So this table doesn't tie directly to either one of those prior two. These grants are either statewide or sub-allocated. The focus of this table is really how are we doing on obligating money on locally managed projects. So that's what that table is showing you. All right, and then last page. This is really just ancillary information, but we will start with producing a running list of grant opportunities. This will really meet two objectives. One is just to make sure you are aware of upcoming deadlines for opportunities that have been announced. It looks like we need to add a couple to this list based on Melanie's announcements today, and we will do that. But the other objective is we want to start tracking our performance and going after this discretionary money. So how many applications are coming from NPO area communities? Of those applications, how many have been funded? So we can understand better what we need to do to take advantage of the funding that is being made available to us, almost unprecedented levels in recent years. And then the last figure here is simply just for your reference. We talk a lot about urbanized areas, and we want to make sure that folks don't think of the Nashville-Davidson urbanized areas being solely Nashville-Davidson County, but it is a larger urbanized area that's defined by the census. That is the basis for sub-allocated funding. The last point I'll make here, though, is that through the board's programming policies, as this is an opportunity under the federal law, we have chosen, generally speaking, to make any community within the metropolitan planning area, which is the 7-county outline on this map, eligible for sub-allocated funding despite the UZA, or largely UZA, things with the larger urban areas, despite the geographic basis for its allocation. Priority is given to communities within those urbanized areas, but the programming policies allow communities outside of those areas to benefit from money. Good example of that is Columbia's success in tapping into active transportation planning grants that are SDBG funds sub-allocated to the Nashville-Davidson UZA, despite them being historically in their own urban cluster. So that is a look at the information we've produced for you this month. Some of the things that we'll be doing to improve this report moving forward is integrating the FTA grants to the full picture of transportation across the region. We'll also begin to itemize projects that are under construction and tracking their progress. We'll also begin to itemize projects that haven't yet started so that we can keep an eye out on those things that may need some support to get underway. So happy to take any feedback or questions from this body as we look to the future of this report. All right, seeing none, Mr. Chair, I think people are ready to get back to their local community.
Okay. I'm looking forward to that solid waste strike force report. Mayor Moore, you the chairman of that? No. Mayor Rowley, Bob Rowley, yeah, my good friend. I'm looking forward to that because we've all got a problem with that solid waste, looks like. It's on top of us now. If nobody has anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, and y'all have a safe trip home. I heard somebody back there. All right, we are adjourned. Thank y'all. I forgot that lady said leave your name tag on the table.